Welcome to Big, Beautiful, and Winning, the pregnancy series. So today I want to walk everyone through my birth story, and it's going to be quite an interesting series of stories. So I'm going to start with 1 week prior to going into labor, a little scare that I had and where I got admitted to the hospital. And then I'm going to walk you through my labor, which went from Tuesday, May 18th to Thursday, May 20th. And then what I really want to highlight today is some of the microaggressions and unfair, inappropriate treatment that I received from the hospital staff while I was in labor, immediately postpartum, all of that kind of stuff, all of that stuff that isn't really fun to talk about. So let's start from a week before I went into labor. So a week before I went into labor, I started having like heart palpitations. So my heart was racing and my heartbeat felt irregular. And I had been doing so much reading and so much research about how the mother's body can affect the baby's body that I was concerned that baby was kind of in distress. I didn't want to ignore what I was feeling and then the baby be in distress and then I regret that for the rest of my life, obviously. So my cousins were here, Ashay and Mickey, shout out to Ashay and Mickey, and they drove me to the hospital where I planned to give birth. I'm not going to mention the name of the hospital in the podcast because I don't want to get sued. Anyway, so I go to the hospital and immediately it's like a bad experience. We get there, we go to the labor and delivery part of the hospital. They tell me that if it's an emergency, I need to go to emergency to emerge. And I'm telling them, well, I'm 39 weeks pregnant. They say it doesn't matter, go to emerge. I go to emerge. They tell one of my cousins that they can't come in. One of them can because I'm pregnant, 39 weeks. So Mickey goes out and waits in the car. Ashay comes in with me. And we wait at emerge for maybe 15 minutes. And then when they finally get to us, they say, no, you need to go to labor and delivery. Okay. At this point, like, I'm still worried. You know, my heartbeat, before deciding to go to the hospital, my heartbeat had been irregular for about 6-7 hours. So this is 8 a.m. in the morning and I'm scared. And then on top of that, I'm frustrated. And I'm also very pregnant. So I go from the emerge over to labor and delivery. And then when I get to labor and delivery, we get admitted, or not admitted, we get seen in triage. Immediately, I can tell triage and labor and delivery is not really taking me seriously. They think I'm just like nervous. I'm just this nervous first-time mom who doesn't really know what her body is doing. So they just kind of, whatever, ask me a whole bunch of questions. And then they take my blood pressure and they take my pulse. And they're like, what is going on? My pulse was all over the map. But the first time that they reported it to me, it was like an average of 170. Your pulse is not really supposed to exceed like 90. So my pulse was 170, and then my pulse was also highly irregular, and my blood pressure was significantly elevated. As soon as they take my pulse, then they start ordering all of the, like, they call my doctor, they call the high-risk OB that's on staff, they order an ultrasound, they order an EKG, and they start trying to figure out what exactly is happening to me, because I look calm. I'm not in any pain. I don't have any chest discomfort or anything like that. I look pretty normal, but my pulse is out of control. So they do my EKG, which is like a heart monitoring thing. And again, all over the map, they have no idea what's going on. They do the ultrasound. The baby's fine. Oche is fine in there doing his thing, breathing normally, unaffected, apparently unaffected by me. They take his pulse. His pulse is pretty normal, but the issue kind of persists with me. So they give me oxygen, I think maybe to kind of calm me down in hopes that it will affect my heart rate. And then they start calling the acute care department in the hospital and the cardiology department and arrange for a transfer. I go down to acute care. I'm in acute care for maybe 5-6 hours. They're running a whole bunch of tests on me. They search for blood clots. They look at my heart and see if there's something going on with my heart. So I think that this is called an echo. They do a number of different tests before they decide that they're going to give me metoprolol to bring down my blood pressure and my pulse. So that's what they do. They give it to me. It kind of brings it down little by little, but I had to get admitted to the hospital and stay with them overnight so that they could continue to read my heart rate, my pulse, and make sure that everything was stable. So I stayed in the hospital overnight. I was so scared. I was not in any pain, no discomfort. And I specifically remember that it's like maybe 8 p.m., 9 p.m. And the night nurse had just started her shift. And just coming in, she's introducing herself to the patients that she's going to be taking care of for her shift. And I was bawling. I was crying. I was so scared that something was going to happen to me or my son. In particular, what I like to do, maybe not the healthiest thing to do, but what I like to do is I like to ask the doctors, in the worst case scenario, what are you going to do? And a couple of doctors, 2 doctors had mentioned to me that if my heart rate doesn't get back into its normal swing, that they would have to use a defibrillator to reset my heart. And that was terrifying to me. That was not something that I wanted to do while pregnant. That's not something that I want to do ever, but certainly not while pregnant. So I was scared. So I was sitting in the room. The night nurse comes in and she wants to say hello or whatever. And I'm bawling. And the first thing that she says is, "Stop crying, you're going to make it worse." And I was like, isn't your job to be like a caregiver and to make people feel comfortable and safe? And I guess, like, obviously people who work in labor and delivery are better at delivering that level of care. But man, I found that to be so insensitive. You're looking at someone who's 39 weeks pregnant with their first child and has been admitted for a heart issue and, is alone, because at this point they had sent my cousin away saying that I can't have a support person because I'm not getting admitted to labor and delivery. I'm getting admitted to cardiology. So all of these things are happening and I'm overwhelmed. And the first thing you do, rather than try to comfort me in any way, shape, or form or ask me any questions, the first thing you say is I should stop crying because it's just going to make it worse. I really question whether or not that woman would have said that to someone who wasn't Black or spoken with that kind of insensitivity had I, not been Black, not been a woman, like it. But then you'd think that because I'm a woman and I'm 39 weeks pregnant that you'd be more understanding. But anyway, it was, that really hurt me. Like, to this moment, I'm thinking about it and I'm like, I can't believe she said that to me. I cannot believe that you would say that to anybody who has just gone through, 12 hours of insane testing and fear. Like, every single doctor that saw me admitted that they don't know what's happening to me. I'm on all of this medication, and the first thing you say to me is that my crying is just going to make it worse. And how do you know that? How do you know that my crying isn't going to relieve me of stress that I've been keeping in my body? Anyway, it turns out I was able to go to sleep that night after that woman told me to stop crying. And around 1 a.m., my heart rate had gone back to normal. Of course, I'm on this medication, so we're not sure if it's the medication or if it's just my body regulating itself, but it had gone back to normal as of 1 a.m. that morning. So my heart rate was at that, 170, 190 heart rate pulse for 24 hours. So that's what happened a week before I went into labor. But they sent me home. I was on the medication, and on May 18th, at around 6 p.m., I started to feel contractions. At first, it was really exciting because it's like, okay, like, he's telling me that he's ready to come out. Like, my son is talking to me. He's ready. He's, my due date was May 17th. So May 18th is just, 24 hours later. And it felt really good to know that he was ready. If you don't know, contractions are supposed to come at kind of regular intervals. And then the intervals get smaller and smaller the closer you are to delivering. So it starts off, it can be like 15 minutes apart. Contractions can be 15 minutes apart. And then, we'll go to 12, and then we'll go to 10, and then, will decrease as you get closer to it. So my contractions, just like everything else, were irregular. Sometimes 10 minutes between, sometimes 7 minutes between. And then for some reason, started to get really, really close together. So every 2 to 3 minutes, they're really, really close together. And I guess I hadn't prepared myself. I watched a lot of birth vlogs, trying to prepare myself for the experience. And I hadn't anticipated that the contractions would be so close together that I wouldn't be able to recover. So when the contractions are 2 to 3 minutes apart, but they last 30 seconds, 45 seconds, that is like, it's not enough time to recover because you can't do anything during the contraction. The contraction stops, and maybe you try to like wash your face or wash your hands or something or carry something, and then you're like, you can't even walk. Anyway, so it was really, really hard because my contractions were really, really close together for a majority of my labor. So it started off and it was like 10, 12 minutes apart. Got closer, jumped from like the 7-minute mark to the 2-minute mark and held steady there. I would say from 11 p.m. on the 18th until I got my epidural on the 19th around 11 a.m. So 12 hours. They were 2 minutes apart, 2 to 3 minutes apart. I definitely underestimated the pain of the contractions, especially when your body is tired because you didn't sleep, and they don't give you any food to eat because you're not supposed to get any food to eat. So anyway, I get to the hospital to get admitted, hopefully, and I'm in a lot of pain. I'm screaming in pain, and they give me morphine because they say that I'm not dilated enough. I'm dilated about 3 centimeters. I'm not dilated enough to receive the epidural, because you don't want to give the epidural too soon and things of that nature. So it's 1 a.m. I get the morphine maybe by between 2 and 3 p.m. 2 and 3 a.m. And the morphine goes into my leg. And I know, like the nurse said, it's not supposed to get rid of the pain. It's supposed to curb the pain or soften the pain or take the edge off. Fam, I did not feel a significant difference. I was really, 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 really uncomfortable, in a lot of pain during the actual contractions. And on top of that, on top of like the pain of the contractions, every hour or so, somebody is putting their 3 to 4 fingers inside your vagina, checking to see how dilated you are. So that's adding to the pain. So terrible experience. Around 6 a.m., they encourage me to start walking so the baby can drop down. Start walking. And I think that they agreed to admit me after about 2-3 hours of walking around the labor and delivery unit, because I had gone to 5 centimeters. Yes, I had gone to 5 centimeters. So they admit me. I get into the birthing suite. So I moved from triage to the birthing suite. I finally can get the epidural. I'm in, like, the amount of pain that I'm in is like whatever. Sorry, I finally get approved for an epidural. But before they can give me the epidural, they said they want to break my water. They warned me that if they break my water, the contractions will get worse before I get the epidural. And this is, again, in an attempt to open up the cervix. I don't know if it's faster, but at this point, it's been 12 hours, right? I'm desperate for the epidural. So I'm like, do what you got to do so that you can give me the epidural, because I cannot do these contractions being 2 minutes apart any longer. Like, this is not cool. I've been in labor for 18 hours and this hurts a lot. So yeah, that they break my waters, leave me for 2 hours. Unbelievable pain. Like, I kept saying, I cannot continue to do this. And people kept trying to comfort me. Like, my mom was trying to, like, rub my head and rub my shoulders and rub my back. I don't want anybody to touch me. Like, just, it felt like someone was squeezing my guts. Like, it was, don't underestimate the pain. There's not really anything you can do to prepare for the pain, but do not underestimate the pain, because it was just really, really, really bad. So I end up, so they break my waters and they give me an epidural. Epidurals are a godsend. I don't know how people did this without epidurals, because it just freezes up everything. I didn't feel any pain. It was amazing. And at this point, you just kind of wait. You can't feel the contractions anymore, so you're just waiting for the baby to drop and for the cervix to open so that you can get ready to push him out. Now, after the epidural, time is passing. I think we waited like maybe 3 hours and nothing was happening. If anything, the cervix was closing back up. And the doctor recommended that we do Pitocin, oxytocin, to help speed things up and get things moving in the right direction. So I got the oxytocin, Pitocin, whatever. Within an hour of receiving the oxytocin, I get a fever. Giving birth during COVID means that when you get a fever, you're automatically put on isolation. I didn't have a fever when I came into the hospital, but I developed a fever while I was in the hospital. They don't know if one of the nurses gave me COVID. They don't know how I got a fever. So they're putting me on isolation because a fever is a symptom of COVID and they don't want to spread COVID. They don't want to have an outbreak on their unit of COVID. The problem with being on isolation, it means that I cannot leave my bedroom or the birthing suite that they put me in. There's a washroom attached to the birthing suite, but that means that my mom getting food, like Skip the Dishes or Uber Eats, she can't leave the birthing suite, so she can't get food from outside. She can't get coffee. She can't get water. I can't get water unless we ask the nurses, and the nurses have to be nice enough to want to do that for you. I'll tell you that for a majority of the time, on the afternoon of May 19th, the nurses completely ignored us. Did not bring water, did not bring food for my mom, did not really check in on us from that perspective. Of course, they would be monitoring the baby's fetal movements and monitoring my drugs and stuff that I was on. Because at this point I have an epidural, I have Pitocin, I think they also gave me my heart medication through the IV. They also gave me, for the fever, they gave me some antibiotics. They also gave me like saline just to keep me hydrated. I also had a catheter in. Like, there's so much happening, but we genuinely felt isolated, forgotten. It was a pretty terrible experience, frankly, especially because to this moment, like, we have no idea how I got a fever. My mom definitely thinks that it was the repeated opening up, everybody checking my cervix every hour, less than, or even more frequently than that. Checking my cervix every hour or even more frequently than that. So not a great experience. We were on isolation for a total of 24 hours. So for the rest of my stay in the hospital, basically, we were on isolation. So they do the COVID swab, they send in the COVID test. Just to fast forward on the COVID test, my COVID test did come back negative. So I did not have COVID. I just had a fever. Again, though, they don't know why I had a fever. And so you have to be on isolation for 12 hours or for 24 hours after your fever breaks as well. So anyway, for the rest of the time I was in the hospital, I was on isolation. Now, after having an epidural and being on Pitocin for a couple of hours, my cervix was still holding steady at between 4 and 5 centimeters. And I'm tired, and my doctor is recommending or is giving me two options. I can stay status quo as is and hope that the cervix opens up and I get to push, or I can go forward with a C-section. Because my son is stable, there's no reason to recommend going forward with a C-section. However, it isn't great. This is what she's telling me. It isn't great to wait until he's in distress to then make the decision to go and do the C-section. Also, with all of the things that are happening, all of the drugs that I'm on, all of the stress that's kind of happening around me, probably also isn't a good idea to wait any longer. So, and also nothing is moving. Like, if things are moving slowly in the right direction, it might be better, but things are moving slowly in the wrong direction where my cervix is closing and the baby has actually, Oche has actually moved up. Like he when after I had gotten the fever and they checked me like a little bit after that, he had moved up in my belly rather than coming down. So moving away from whatever the point of infection was inside of me. So I made the decision around 11 p.m. on Wednesday, May 19th, to go forward with a C-section. Now, C-sections, unless they're emergencies, mine wasn't an emergency. C-sections are not immediately. You kind of get booked and you get a slot and they explain to you what's going to happen and all that kind of stuff. So it was 11 o'clock and they booked me for the 1 a.m. slot. So they kind of rolled me in there. I think I was in there like 10 minutes to 1. They really numb you up. So they up your epidural. And put that curtain that you see on TV that makes it so that you can't see what's happening over there. And they open it up. Apparently, this is what the doctor said. Apparently, when they opened my stomach up, my son was laying there, staring at them, like eyes open, just staring at them. And then when they went to remove him from my belly, usually, babies are all slippery and stuff. They kind of just slide out of their mother. But my son was not coming out. Like, I could feel, not in a painful way, but I could feel the surgeon kind of like yanking my son out of my body because little guy didn't want to come out. He was having a good time, snug inside of me. So that was a funny story. And of course, like, when I heard him cry for the first time, like, oh my gosh, like, the tears. Like, I was just so overwhelmed. Everything that I just told you over the last, 28 minutes just kind of came over me. I couldn't believe everything that I went through to have this child, and I was so thankful that he was, his lungs are working, he's able to cry, he's with me now, out on the outside. So an overwhelming amount of emotion when he cried, and they take him over to the area where they do all the checks, and he's fine. And he kind of comes with us to the postpartum room, and it's an absolutely amazing experience. Yeah. I think that's it for this episode. I think I've done a pretty good job of kind of walking you through what led to the birth of my son, whose name is Oche Joseph Adamu, born 8 pounds 7 ounces on Thursday, May 20th at 1:03 a.m. His name Oche means king, and he's truly the king of my heart. And to say that I wouldn't change anything is probably a little bit of a lie. I could have done without that heart episode the week before, but definitely everything happens for a reason. So I'm blessed and I'm grateful. Next week, I will be bringing you a little bit of what life is like postpartum, and I look forward to talking to you then. Thank you again so much for listening to Big, Beautiful, and Winning, the Pregnancy Series.